You're watching Cable 8, Greensboro Community Television.
Hi, thanks for joining us once again for Greensboro Glimpses. On this program, my guest is a lady who is heading an organization that is doing a wonderful job and a wonderful work for many, many people in our community. That is Restoration Place, and she is Cindy Mandela, the Executive Director. Cindy, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
It's been several years since you've been on the program. Let's refresh our viewers' memories a little bit, and we probably got a lot of new ones since then. Tell us a little bit about Restoration Place, what it is, what you do.
Well, we are a professional counseling center that serve girls and women ages 12 and up who might be struggling with issues such as depression, anxiety, eating disorders, relationships, anything that you might think, mental or emotional issues that you might seek out professional counseling for. But we offer our services on a significantly discounted sliding fee scale. So clients pay based on annual household income, and that's even adjustable based on what their financial needs are. We serve, really our focus is the underserved and underinsured, because there's such a gap that's needed to be filled. So, and
probably getting worse with some of the
yes, it is actually
mess that our whole healthcare system is in right now.
Right.
You got started as a result of your own personal situation, and tell us as much of that as you feel comfortable talking about.
Yeah. Well, myself, I struggled really beginning in high school, probably even earlier than that, with depression, anxiety, and that really led to behaviors I struggled with an eating disorder. I struggled with alcohol addiction. My grandfather was an alcoholic, so I think I inherited that gene. And so really, my life was just a mess. From the outside, it might not have looked that way. I was still somewhat successful in finishing college and starting a career. But it was during that struggle and during really the early years of recovery. In December of 1996 is when I got sober, and by the grace of God, that is still my sobriety date. And it was during those early years that a friend of mine suggested that I seek out counseling, and I said, well, I've been to counselors, I don't know if that would really help, and she said, have you thought about a Christian counselor? And so I thought about that, and I thought, well, I'll give that a try. And so I began meeting weekly with a counselor who worked from a Christian worldview, and that was a very big part of what God used to really bring full recovery and full healing to my life and to my heart. And so it was during that time that I really decided that I wanted to help others have the same opportunity that I had had. I figured if I could get better, anybody could. And so that was really the thing that drove me to want to become a counselor myself, and then want to start something like this.
And who better to understand than someone who's been there?
Yeah.
And so how did you get started? What led to Restoration Place?
Wow. Yeah. Sometimes I think back, I was just visiting my parents over Mother's Day weekend, and my mom asked me, she said, do you ever just sit back and look and think, look at all that's happened over these last 9 years? And I told her, sometimes I'm so in the day-to-day of it that I forget to look at the big picture. As I was beginning to near the end of my degree, of my master's degree, I knew that I wanted to work with women, and I knew that I didn't want to be bound by a larger system that would limit how I could incorporate my faith and spirituality into the counseling process. That had been such a big part of my own healing that I just felt like I can't do this if I can't offer fully what I know was the answer for me. And then there was also this other piece of counseling is really expensive, and a lot of people can't afford it. And I would find that I loved counseling so much that I would always, say to a friend if they were complaining about something that they were going through, have you thought about counseling? And the answer that I would normally get is, yes, but I can't afford it. And so I really wanted just to have a place where women could come. They could come for as long as they needed to really dig deep and deal with those things that were, deeply rooted in their souls that were possibly causing the outward, dysfunctional behaviors that they were engaging in. And where cost wouldn't be a barrier to them coming. And so that's really how it got started. Somebody said, well, to do that, you're going to need to form a nonprofit. And I said, okay, how do I do that? And probably if I'd have known what I was getting myself into, I might have been a little bit more hesitant. But
and it's not just a matter of having some people that are interested in helping. I mean, all of your people on your staff are certified counselors,
right?
State certified. Yes.
So we have, all of my counselors. I have 7 counselors right now. Actually, I'm looking to hire one more that are have their master's level licensed therapist. Most of them are licensed professional counselors. I do have one. Actually, I have 2 that are dually licensed with LPC and licensed marriage and family therapist as well. So.
Okay. It's often said, or you often hear, that people have to really hit bottom before they seek help. Do you find that to be true? Do people come to you after they've tried other things, or maybe just on their last leg, so to speak?
Well, I think sometimes they'll come to us when maybe they haven't actually come to the end of themselves, so to speak, or hit bottom. And sometimes they leave for a while, but then they'll call back. Very often I'll hear one of my counselors saying, oh, I had just discharged this client, because after a certain amount of time, if they've been inactive, then we go ahead and discharge them. And, I'll hear them say, but, they just called back and want to start back up. And so it's very much more of a circular process than a linear process. But usually the ones that come in and that are really determined and really want to work hard and are ready for a life change have hit that bottom, whatever that might be, whether it's spiritually or emotionally or physically.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that your organization, your counseling approach is faith-based or Christian-based. Could you tell us a little bit about exactly what constitutes Christian counseling as opposed to, say, some other type?
Right. Well, really, everybody has a worldview. Everybody has a value system. And so our value system is that of a biblical worldview. So we really hold strongly to what the Bible says is our foundation. We are all Christians who work there. But I have learned over the years that at times that can be a very confusing term. So what I try to say is that we are first counselors. We are licensed, clinicians who are very skilled in knowing how to treat, diagnose, treat whatever a woman might bring into the counseling room. And I guess hand in hand with that is that we do believe God is the ultimate healer, and that we are just instruments in His hand. And so as we're in that counseling room with a client, we are always aware that it's not us, but it's God in us who is leading that way. Because a lot of times you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I thought I'd heard it all, but here's something else, and what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to help this person? And so really we will bring that piece, we'll bring the spirituality and the faith and, whether it's prayer or whatever into the therapeutic process to the extent that a client is comfortable and that she requests that.
And I think that's important because you don't have any faith requirements for
No.
people getting your help.
No, anyone can come.
Yeah.
And we will love them just the same.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Yeah. No, and I understand that fully because the years that I was with the Salvation Army, we often heard that, well, I've got to come and convert and all that before you can help me. No, I understand exactly what you're going through. Okay, well, talk to us a little bit about the process now. What happens? Does someone have to be referred, or can they contact you directly?
They can contact us directly. So they could call us, they can email us through our website. Usually the most efficient way is just to go ahead and call us. We will take their information, just basic information, and a general idea of why they want to come to counseling, because what we want to do then is to pair them with that counselor. Like I have one counselor that really is skilled in working with people struggling with some sort of eating disorder. I have several counselors that do, a lot of relationship work, couples work, marital work. Have a couple that work a lot with women who have experienced past abuse, childhood sexual abuse, things like that. And so we want to know, like, what is she coming for, so that we can put you with the best counselor, make that best fit. Of course, the client always has the option to request someone, that they specifically have heard of, or that maybe a friend has seen that they would like to see themselves. And then from that point, the counselor will call the client, the client referral back, and set up the first appointment, and they go from there.
Is there any way you can say how long a typical session might last? And I mean, in terms of months or?
Right. Well, in terms of the sessions, the first session is always an hour and a half, and then the other sessions are 50 minutes to an hour. On average, our clients stay around 5 to 6 months. Some stay, for weekly sessions. Some come in and are able to, they have one specific goal, something that they need to work on, and then they achieve that, and they're gone until the next time.
Right.
And some, some stay a lot longer. It really depends on what the issue is that they're bringing.
I was going to ask you, what are the, without being specific, of course, in terms of names, but what are the most prevalent issues that you deal with, the problems that people are having?
Well, we track when somebody calls and what they tell us that they want to come to counseling for. Obviously, you get into the room with them, and your diagnosis may be a little bit different. You may see something else that's going on. But we, tracking what they bring to the process, what they say that they want help with, about 50% is depression or anxiety. Obviously, beneath that are all sorts of things that they may have dealt with, or trauma in their lives. And then, eating disorders, relationships are a big one. Marriages that are in trouble. Like I said, the past abuse, some that have currently been in abusive, whether domestic or intimate partner abuse. We see some of that. So we do also, we treat women who have been diagnosed with disorders like bipolar disorder or personality disorders. We don't do as much with the chronic severe mental illness, just because we don't have really the capacity. That takes a lot more than just the individual counseling that we're able to offer.
Do you make referrals, say, to a psychiatrist or a psychologist?
Yes, we have a very big community referral, community resource book that we use. And I try to get out in the community and meet other providers, and we have really good relationships with different, psychiatrists or other agencies that might provide something different than what we actually do.
Very good. Now, you mentioned abuse, and there are all sorts of types of abuse, emotional, physical. We understand, I think, those terms, but you also list spiritual abuse, and that's something that I wanted to ask you about. Exactly what constitutes spiritual abuse?
Well, like I was saying earlier, that's probably a phrase that means different things to different people.
I don't think so.
In our setting, what I see a lot is there was, for instance, I took a call one time, and it was a woman who had anxiety, had been diagnosed with an general anxiety disorder, had just experienced the death of a very close family member, and because of that, her anxiety was exacerbated, and she was just really struggling, and she just really needed a place to process that grief and to get some help and better getting a handle on her anxiety so that she could cope with that better. She happened to be in a church where there was a counselor on staff. I'm not sure if it was a licensed counselor or a biblical counselor, and had been told by that counselor that the reason why you're awake at night and not able to sleep and have these anxious thoughts and feelings is because you're not praying enough. You're not, your faith is not strong enough. The Bible says don't be anxious. So if you're anxious, it's a sin. And to me, that's just very irresponsible,
yes,
and
it's
abusive because it's not presenting God's word in the way it is supposed to be, and it's also not taking into account the reality of mental illness, and that sometimes our brains just don't function the way they were supposed to function in the beginning.
Yeah, and that's something that I have found too in my work. Too many times it's very easy to say, well, you're just, that's a sin, just get over it. It's not that easy.
No. No.
No, the wires are crossed, or there's something very real about emotional illness, and far too many people, I think, don't realize that or don't understand that. and we attach a stigma to somebody. I mean, you know, if somebody has a cold, we don't think much about that.
Right.
But mental illness is also an
Right.
illness, and it's not something that we should attach a stigma to.
And we also see that a lot with the clients that come in, especially clients that have been in a church that have really taken that approach of it's just sin, you
Yes.
need to get over it.
Yeah.
They really struggle with accepting, in their minds, they really think I should be able to just handle this. And, you know, I'm always like, well, if you had diabetes, would you just, like, would you not take your insulin, or would you, you know, like, or if you had high blood pressure, would you not take the medication for that? Would you just expect your body to just deal with it, you know? And but it's really hard for them to make that connection sometimes.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear you say that, because no doubt a lot of these churches probably mean well, but gee, they're misguided. I mean, you just can't write it off that easily and say, well, just get over it.
Right.
And it doesn't work.
Right.
Okay, very good. How many people are you seeing on the average now, say in a typical month or in a year?
Right now, in a month, we're probably seeing about between 600 and 700 sessions. You know, that varies a little bit. Summertime tends to be a little bit slower. Holiday seasons tend to be a little bit slower. Since we started, we're right at maybe 1,300 clients that we've served. And so we've continued to see an increase. I think the last time I was here, I had just moved into some larger office space, and we had gone from it just being me as the only practitioner to hiring a few other counselors. And like I said earlier, I have seven counselors on staff. I have a full-time clinical supervisor starting on July 1st. Yay, we are so excited. And
yeah, very good.
Yeah, beyond ready for her to be there.
And you say you're looking to hire another counselors also?
Yes, we are anticipating the need for another counselor, so we've actually been in the interview process for that.
How are you funded? I mean, you said you have a very sliding scale of fees. How are you funded?
You know, part of our budget obviously is met by the earned income from the counselor fees. And just a side note, many times people wonder, well, why don't you do the service for free? And one thing that we've learned is obviously with anything, you need to have a little skin in the game. And so we do ask that the clients pay something. And then we have individual donors. We have a very large fundraiser that we do every March, which is a fashion show.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, we're in the planning process for our 5th annual Restoration Runway, and that will be March 27th, and we'll be at the Greensboro Country Club again. So it's just a way for us to really, the reason I went with the fashion show is to, in a way, to push back against what society says is beautiful. So all of our models are just an everyday woman from petite to plus size, different ages, 20-something to 70-something, different, culturally diverse, so that we really promote the true beauty of a woman.
Yeah.
And so it went from just a fashion show, now it's a fashion show and silent auction and live auction. So it's quite a big undertaking, but it does provide about 30% of our funding, and then we have a small percentage of grants. Always, that's a little bit more difficult to.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The byword of nonprofits, grants.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. Now, do you accept insurance at all?
We do not file insurance. If our clients are fortunate enough to have mental health insurance, we will give them all the necessary codes and paperwork and signatures and all that they need, where they can file their own claim, but they pay for the session, and then they can be reimbursed by their insurance company.
You talked earlier about eating disorders, and you have a group program, intuitive eating.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Right.
That sounded interesting.
Well, actually, we don't have it going on this summer, but it's really one of my counselors who specializes in eating disorders. It's really a way to help women. It's not so much for the severe diagnosis of anorexia or bulimia, but I think in our culture alone, we're all a little messed up when it comes to our eating. And so it's the group is based on a book by some nutritionists that began to see that dieting was really the culprit. And so that we try to make dieting the solution for being a society that's somewhat overweight, but in reality, it's the dieting that's part of the problem. So your solution can't be the same thing that's part of the problem. So it's just these 10 principles, and teaching people what true hunger is, what being full is, how to find satisfaction in eating, how to get rid of all the diet mentality, get rid of all the rules, and really learn to be in tune, become intuitive. I think we're all born, if you think about a baby, when a baby's done eating, they push away. And very soon we somehow that intuition gets messed up by our culture or by parents saying you need to clean your plate. But, so there's all this that goes into us that we really need to bring out and set straight.
Well, that's something I wanted to ask you, and you've been there, so you understand it firsthand. What really causes bulimia, anorexia? Is it a desire to be slim and svelte and to, look like the fashion models in the magazines, or what's the cause?
Oh, that's probably something that we don't have time to even get into.
I'm sure it's complex.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's one specific cause. A lot of times it's more about feeling out of control for whatever reason and wanting to be in control, and focusing on the food. The food is really just a symptom of what's going on inside. So, for me, it was just a sense of never feeling like I quite fit, like something just wasn't quite right, and so feeling like I needed somehow to exert control over my own life. I didn't understand that I could have that in healthy ways. So I know that's a very simple and
it's interesting because
vague answer.
Well, you hear so many different things. I mean, as I said, some people think, gee, I've got to look like the model in the magazine, or And
I mean, part of that cultural myth, that's what we've taught beauty is, I think contributes to young girls, hyper focusing on that. But it's really a deeper. There's something deeper going on than just what you think you need to look like on the outside.
Do you find that most people that come to you have done it on their own, or do they have to be, I started to say pushed, but maybe encouraged is a better word, by somebody else before they take that step and go to counseling?
When they have an eating disorder or anything?
In general, anything. Any issues.
Most of the time once they make the call, they're doing it because they want it. Someone may have suggested it to them. Obviously, like one of our top referral sources is word of mouth or other clients that have been with us. Other than adolescents, usually if they're adults, they're coming because they want to. We don't have court mandated. We don't have all of that. If they're adolescents, that's another story. And one of the first questions my counselor will ask the parent when they're calling is, does your daughter want to come to counseling? Because if a parent just has the attitude of bringing the adolescent and saying, here, fix them, you're not going to get very far.
Right. But I did want to ask you, what are the biggest reasons that you find in young people, say teens, you've started at age 12, say through 18, 19, what's the biggest reason that you find that young people need counseling? Right.
That would be a really good piece of data for me to run. Just anecdotally, I would say a lot of it is either they do have some depression or anxiety going on, or many times it's more of an identity, self-image. They're going through that puberty, moving into trying to make that shift from being a little a child to being, a teenager, and then moving into the adult world, and it's just a really messy process. And so a lot of times they're coming just for support and to really have someone other than their parents help them navigate figuring out who they are. And so so that's probably the biggest reason that
we're hearing a lot these days about bullying, particularly in schools. Are you finding a lot of that? Yeah, that's become a real problem for a lot of kids, isn't it?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you do counsel couples, so you do have some men in your program, but
we do
primarily women. And I asked you this earlier, but I was just wondering: is there any thought maybe given to a man's division or going into counseling for men as well?
I would love for someone to take that, you know, and take that baby and birth it.
Right. Right.
I don't know, you know, again, like I mentioned to you, it's since day one, people have asked, you know, I remember when I was still seeing clients and I worked with a lot of college girls, and they would come in saying, is there any place, I have this guy friend in the college ministry, and he's really struggling with whatever, is there any place he can go that's like this? And to date, I don't think there is. You know, there are a couple of counselors in town that will work on a sliding, you know, fee scale, maybe not as significantly discounted as ours, but so we do have some places to refer, but it would be great to have that brother-sister organization. I'm not sure how that will come to be.
Maybe a dream for down the road. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Just a little bit of time left. Tell our viewers, particularly some that may have tuned in late, what do they need to do now if they feel like they need help? How do they avail themselves?
Right, they would just call our office, and I'm assuming you're going to put the information up on
We've had the number on the screen and the address.
So, yes, they would just call our office, and we would be happy to talk to them and find out exactly, you know, what their needs are, and get them hooked up with one of our counselors as soon as possible and get them. Right now, we have a short waiting list. And it's the first time it's happened in almost 9 years, and so I'm hoping, though, over the next month or two, once my new supervisor comes on, she'll also be seeing clients. We'll be able to get back to seeing people within a week or two. But they just give us a call and.
Well, it sounds like you're doing. I mean, it doesn't sound like you obviously are doing a great job in our community, and your passion for your work is clearly in evidence, and I'm sure that translates into your counselors as well. Cindy, thank you so much for being with us and sharing this great work. You bet. Good to see you. And as always, we thank you for watching our program.
You're watching Cable 8, Greensboro Community Television.